blockages that are in the first mile as well as the last mile, because if I'm able to transact electronically, digitally, and the party that I'm transacting with also has got a store of value, we can be digitized end to end. And in this respect, we need to unlock from where we're sitting the regulatory frameworks that should be enabling for the reforms to be realized. And we believe with the state also championing some of the aspects that we need to look at, we are ready, standing ready to hold hands with them to ensure that we contribute towards finding solutions. I'm excited that in this call, there's experiences that will be learned from other jurisdictions which have in some way already advanced in some of the areas that we're looking at. And we believe that we can learn quite a lot from them. And in the quest to resolve whatever blockages we realize, we believe it needs collaboration. And in this respect, the public-private partnership would be key in making us achieve our goal. I'll stop here, Kathy, and the colleagues from the presidency, just to underscore that we are excited about the engagements that will be happening, and we would definitely be joining the subsequent series events so that we can, together with yourselves, crack our heads to find solutions. I thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim, for those exciting words, and also on some guidance as to where we're actually going in the payment space from the SARB perspective. Carla or Marcel, can I ask you to go to the agenda slide, please? Thanks so much. So just so that you know, we've actually just heard from Tim, and we're going to hand over to Rudy in a minute just to give us a bit of a background and an objective to the webinar series. We didn't get here by accident. We've been trying very hard to get here. Over quite a few months. It's actually been a journey that started since COVID last year, and it's been, sorry, I think things are just bouncing around on my screen. Carla, will you just put up the slides again? Do you want me to share? Thanks, Marcel. Straight after that, we'll actually hear from Douglas Pearce, who's actually been the sort of lead at the World Bank, who's been supporting a lot of the work that we have been doing with the World Bank and with the presidency, supporting various government institutions. And then obviously Mr. Bernard Ray, who's the head of cooperation at the EU delegation, is going to give us some words around partnering. And then we're going to start with the core part of the program, which is really an overview of G2P payments, where we're going to hear from Harish Natarajan from the World Bank, who's actually the head of global payments. Once we've done that, can you go back, please? Thank you. Once we've done that, we're going to hear from the government of Turkey, where we will hear from Mr. Mehmet Safakochi, and we're also going to hear from Gülben Ünal Yaraş. And then we'll move to learnings and lessons from India, where Arun Sharma is going to guide us through that process. And then finally, we've got about half an hour for questions on that. Please feel free to post as many questions as you like in the chat. You notice that we haven't run this as a webinar so that we can remain relatively interactive. So please put as many of the questions in the chat, and we will try and answer as many of them as possible. So Rudy, over to you. If you can please take us through where we're at. Rudy is the head of the project management office in the presidency, and is doing some really exciting work at the presidency. He's been driving the presidential employment stimulus. The presidency's program that Rudy has been heading also was instrumental in designing the R350 SRD grant, as well as some very exciting work around Operation Vulindlela. With that, Rudy, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Mine is just the team has prepared a few slides. Can I share?
Yes, please. Go ahead. Next slide, please.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So Kathy, will they present it? Okay, yeah, okay. So listen, I mean, I think this is quite an exciting.
I was just going to leave the house now, but if you want to pick him up, you can.
Imran, can you mute, please?
Can we move to the next slide, please, Marcel?
So yeah, just, I mean, I think that this is quite exciting stuff. And as Tim has suggested, this is work that has been, probably in Tim's space, has been coming on for quite a bit of time, but came to a head during the course of last year. And as COVID hit us, there was a significant economic shock around the world. We had to develop responses, and of course, what did happen was that we were given this opportunity as the project management team to be able to try and see what are the key programs that we could do. Our response was, as Kathy had suggested early on, was that we were quite instrumental in the design of the SRD grant, which was the 350 social relief of distress grant. As part of an additional payment, there was also the caregivers grant that was, another area of work. Now, part of this was quite interesting because Tim helped us along the way. Kathy, of course, also had facilitated these conversations where, we had to do an exercise of determining the universe of people that we needed to target. But more importantly, the bigger problem was that how do we pay people in the quickest possible time? And this has been the conversation that we've had where we, for example, put into process a payment expert team, that were able to give some suggestions, and of course, what we were able to do is make some of those recommendations to SASSA. We also, at the same time, perhaps slightly later on, started the development and implementation of the presidential employment stimulus, where we had targeted over 700,000 people, particularly young people, into public employment programs, and this was quite important. One of the I must recognize the team that has been quite critical in doing this, but we did it as within 6 months and at great scale, right? So we spent about 12.6 billion rand. I mean, one of the things that have confronted us again is how one does payments in that respect. And then, of course, the same with COVID tests. So there's been a lot of challenges, but to the fore, what came to the fore was the fact that you needed to develop systems of how we can get money flowing quite quickly through the economy in an efficient way. And so, of course, these kind of conversations that we've had have been quite critical. So what Tim and the team and others from the World Bank have allowed us to think through innovation. And nothing gets us thinking like a crisis. You need a crisis to be able to ensure that innovation flows and you have some of ideas. Some of the stuff that we did was and thought through was onboarding beneficiaries electronically. And this was, some of it was learning from global experiences as how we can do that. Innovations in payment, for example, getting rid of long queues, integrated data on back end, issues around interoperability, getting SASSA systems to work with SaaS systems, to work with UIF systems, to work with the national, identification database at Home Affairs. Payment solutions also, trying to think through how best we pay people, and for instance, one of the more innovative ways we did using, for example, the R15 transversal contract of Vodacom was to introduce a voucher system to pay, close to thousands of farmers on the voucher system, and that was another innovative way of trying to get it as quickly as possible. Challenges, of course, as you can imagine. And then, of course, UIF payments that have been in excess of 61 billion, normally 10 times the payments that they do as part of the UIF TERS scheme. Next slide, please. So these have been all the kind of stuff. We also saw significant challenges. I mean, the problem without having a adequate, innovative government to payment system, we continue to see long queues. For those who use post offices or those who experience long queues when it's normal SASSA payments, even this has been exacerbated because we had to pay close to 6 million people the SRD grant, and of course there were significant implementation barriers, right? Without a modern and innovative government to payment persons system that is suggested. So this again shows the need for us to have this kind of conversation where you, for example, can avoid this kind of long queues and people having to stand at 4 or 5 in the morning waiting to be paid out when electronic systems or other forms of innovative systems can be used in the way that we wanted to be paid. Next slide, please. Other challenges also included, next slide, please. Just go back. Yeah, so we also experienced problems around, the voucher system also, although I thought it was an innovative thing. ECD payments, teacher systems, how we could pay that. I mean, kids at schools were getting checks and were, thinking about how they were going to cash this. They had to wait. Some kids had to wait for a bit of time to be paid. There was no standardized system on how we can do it. So think about the ECD system. Sorry, not the ECD system, the employment stimulus, which was one of our largest public employment programs that we did as part of the presidential employment stimulus. It was, specifically getting young people to work as teacher assistants and general assistants at 24,000 schools across the country. The basic education department employed 319,000. Now, there was no uniform system of how they should be paid. And so province decided, schools decided, districts decided on their own how best to pay these young people. Again, if we had a proper system and an innovative way of trying to do this, this could work. I mean, some of the problems with the agricultural voucher was that, this was vulnerable to exploitation, for example, where we know that certain, suppliers would say, would take a cut, so if you were given a voucher of 10,000, they would say, well, you know what, we're going to take 1,000 of this if you want to use this voucher here by us, so these were some of the challenges that are there around it. Next slide, please. Again, can you go to the next slide also? Sorry, it seems to be stuck. Okay. Again, with UIF COVID TERS, again, long queues also, you need to find better systems of payment. We tried to deal with interoperability and getting it linked up to SARS. Again, these kind of innovative things were there, could be exploited. And I think this kind of workshop that we're having today and for the future is going to be very important. Next slide, please. So the key questions for us is, how does government modernize, digitize, and automate its application solutions to ensure swift access to government programs? So in a sense, how do we get registration and onboarding? That's always a big problem, particularly when you talk about the scales that we have in South Africa on, getting a significant number of people into social relief programs or into public employment programs, given the kind of economic challenges that we do. And we always be set with that. We can't do standardized payment systems. What we learned last year was very different innovative systems, USSD systems, WhatsApp messages. You also have to take into account the challenges of access to mobility, mobile telephony, or even access to data to get access to mobile telephony, and that kind of challenges. And how does government ensure that these programs are inclusive, that promotes dignity and safety of our citizens? So standing in queues for old people, standing in queues for young people, and them having to risk, collecting their money and, waiting for hours and hours in line, does require us to think about a different approach to this, So, I mean, for us, it's quite clear that, what we do need is to think through, payment solutions where onboarding and payment solutions that are being developed across the whole of government. We need to look at where it's been successful and where we can replicate it, easily replicate it, instead of a proliferation. Because what we have in government, and I suppose it's potentially the same thing elsewhere, is that you have many different systems, and perhaps we need to learn from each other. And this is the kind of conversation that I think it's important to have. So some solutions are costly, and we need to look for that. But also there are solutions that, for example, also creates opportunity and rent seeking. And so we need to work through that. But in a sense, what we want is a system that stands up to scrutiny and meets audit requirements. Many of these innovative systems may not move along in the same way that the audit general is moving along. And so they raise a whole lot of audit queries around verification and whether people have been adequately verified, onboarded, and whether the electronic system payments, for instance, can stand the kind of protection and not be hacked or compromised in any particular way. do we pay the right person? And do we pay the person on time, right? Prevent double dipping. That was one of the major problems during the course of last year, where you had to look at this and ensure that they are not the same person dipping in different programs. And of course, limiting the number of those who don't have access to these programs, not receiving them, and well targeted. Again, issues around vulnerability to fraud, corruption, and ID theft. These are critical areas that we need to look at, and meet global and local financial intelligence financial intelligence required. So we comply with laundering and terror financing provisions and legislation. And so it's a complex environment that we work in, but we think that we can get there learning from different examples and experiences. And COVID-19 gave us those opportunities that we need to move into the kind of space. So just a kind of scene setting and why we're here today. Next slide, please. So next slide, please.
Marcel, can you just move to the next slide?
Okay, let me just talk to the next slide. Okay, so this is part of the first seminar that we're doing, it's partly meant to develop capacity for government to person payments and future payments in terms of our webinar series. So today is our first session where we're looking at a whole of government approach to digitize G2Ps, and this is the thematic area. We'll get to know a bit of examples elsewhere in the world and how it's operated elsewhere. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to look at next generation G2P architecture. The 6th of October, we will be looking at learning sessions from G2P payments, examples on end-to-end solutions, onboarding, payment disbursements, and payout options. So a little bit more detail and granular around what we can learn. 20th of October, we will look at data standards and uses in stacks. 3rd November, we look at G2Ps and P2Gs and digitization of the public sector, governance, public financial management, and procurement arrangements. These are also complex stuff. Many people in the, many businesses wanting to get in and support government and how we deal with that. 17th November, beneficiary-centric design, onboarding, and making sure we target the right people, and that it's easy to use, and systems provide more benefits for individuals that do require this. 1st December, second last, is Intergovernment FinTech Working Group, which is a hackathon. And the 15th December will be our last webinar series where we look at integrated database for coordinated social service delivery. So I'm quite excited that this is a good start. We have a whole intense sessions for the next 2 to 3 months looking at this, looking forward to that. So, I mean, for us, this is going to be quite critical on what we want to achieve. And so these objectives are, as I've set it out, and as Tim has spoken about the kind of history to some of these things. For us, it's firstly important to build advocacy and raise awareness on government to payments agenda, and to look at innovative and new methods that have been built elsewhere and learning from them. So what is the kind of architecture? What sort of next generation tools are we able to use? Secondly, to build capacity for government and stakeholders, because that's the main important, that people know and understand how this can be used, so that we are able to comply and with many prescripts and with auditing requirements. Build capacity by learning from other countries, and I think this is very, very important. We will be doing that today. Build a coalition and working group to cooperate across government stakeholders. This is going to be important because government to persons payment system is not a simply one department kind of function. It's learning from different systems that are in the government sphere. It's about learning different data sets that are there, creating interoperability and working together to ensure that this can happen. Building momentum to undertake a comprehensive mapping of this kind of payments. potentially lead to the development of a digital payment system, roadmap, principles for adoption, and or pilots. And that's quite important that we need to take it into a next phase. So talking about this, but even developing an implementation plan would be quite critical. And this is something useful that we can do in the presidency from a PMO perspective. And lastly, of course, streamlining government to persons payments in South Africa and moving away from a structured, fractured, duplicative, and onerous systems that are there. And so this is quite important objectives, and I thought it's critical, Kathy, that we set it out in this workshop, and as we move forward to the next session, I think this will be very, very useful. So really excited. Thank you for joining us, and over to you, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Rudy, for actually talking us through the journey over the last year and a bit. It's been quite an interesting journey, and we've had quite a few struggles along the process. And I think if we think about where we're moving to in the digital revolution, I think it's far more significant than the invention of paper and writing and what email did to the communications world. And I think fundamentally, the biggest part of our digital transformation is really starting to change the way we actually think about things, and how we've been doing things in the past, and obviously trying to leapfrog into a new age. So with that, Rudy, those are wonderful words, and this is really the start of a journey that will take us through to December. The sessions are scheduled roughly every 2 to 3 weeks, as Rudy has guided you. So now I'd just like to hand over to Douglas Pierce, if you can just pop up his CV, thanks so much, who's actually the practice manager responsible for the Africa region at the Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation Division at the World Bank. Douglas, over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. So I'll keep my remarks short. I think the remarks already from Tim and Rudy were excellent, and if we've already dived into the substance. So from our side, I'd just like to say, we're delighted that this webinar series is starting. This is an excellent level of participation today, so that's very encouraging. And we'd like to, from our side, welcome everyone who's participating, and also to say thank you for colleagues from the governments of India, Turkey, who are joined as experts and colleagues sharing their experience. So great to have you, and also, of course, welcome to all those from National Treasury, from SARB, BASA, EU, SECO, and others. So as Tim and Rudy have set out very clearly, G2P payments are have never been more important. Governments around the world are responding to the economic and social impacts of the pandemic, and that's really just brought to clear relief how critically important digital payments are, even beyond the advantages and the rationale that we already knew. So in the World Bank Group, we've been focused on building payment systems, and also digitizing government-to-person payments as a driver for payment systems development, for financial inclusion, and for a whole range of reasons for quite some time. So my colleague Harish Natarajan will be an expert resource person for this session. He's led our work on development payment systems over a number of years, and he's really an excellent person to be talking this morning. The whole of government approach, of course, is critical, as we've seen during the pandemic response. So bringing together government ministries, agencies, driving efficient, innovative solutions in partnership with the private sector is key. And our team in South Africa, through the Financial Sector Development Reform Program, has been actively supporting Treasury, SARB, in these whole of government approaches, and in particular the National Financial Inclusion Policy and Strategy, the reviewed National Payment Systems Act, more recently the Unemployment Insurance COVID TER scheme that we've been supporting around improving validation of beneficiaries and efficiency of payments. So we try and provide very practical support in addition to the analytical work that we also for which this is a central topic. So the webinar will highlight international experiences from Turkey and India in their journeys to digitize government-to-person payments. This is a great opportunity to learn from their successes, but also to understand the challenges faced and how they were overcome. So I think in closing, I'd like to just acknowledge the important support for digitization of GDP payments that Swiss SECO provides, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation provides through the government to person, plus the GTBX program here in South Africa and in many other countries. So with that, back to you, Kathy. And this is, as I said, it's an excellent session, and we're very happy to be supporting this and the subsequent sessions in this series. Thank you.
Douglas, thank you very much for those kind words, and more importantly, thank you for your support. We very often come to you requiring you to sort of extend resources at very short notice to actually help the presidency or the UIF in that, and whenever we're having to develop some government-to-person payment solution, more recently around the digital vouchers, and the World Bank has always been very supportive, so thank you. Bernard is the head of cooperation at the EU delegation, and has actually obviously been in Kenya, Nigeria, and Madagascar. Bernard, over to you. Nice to see you.
Well, good afternoon to all of you, and very happy to give these few words of introduction and to stress how relevant this series of webinar is for the European Union. And also very happy, of course, to join the World Bank and the government in funding this series of webinars under the leadership of the PMU of the presidency. Innovation and digitalization feature as one of the 5 key areas of priorities for the European Commission in its international cooperation. It's at the same level as the Green Deal that everybody has heard about, as the migration agenda, the peace and security one, or the jobs agenda. So this being said, on digitalization, it's clear that, and there has been a very interesting policy brief prepared by the European Center for Development Policy Monitoring in the Netherlands on building the strategic European digital cooperation with Africa. And they really stress that how the European Union promotes a human-centric approach to a global digital governance, and making technology work for citizens and protecting individual freedom is essential, as well as breaking the digital divide. And this really expands and put at the same level the internal policy of the European Union and the external policy one, because these are objectives pursued in Europe, in particular on global digital governance and regulation. So in South Africa, we have been very happy to collaborate with Rudy and to provide through the CBPEP program major support with achieving the results he presented, and I don't want to repeat those, but we are entering a new programming cycle with South Africa. New set of programs will be prepared. And clearly, the digital agenda will feature in the coming years in areas of our cooperation. It can be reducing service delivery, infrastructure development, creating jobs in the green sector, or partnering on major international challenges. E-government will feature at the center, and it's certainly a future area of cooperation, and that's really the relevance of today's webinar. So the support we have provided and where we are now is really paving the way for digitalization, e-government services, efficient G2P payment solutions, to make sure that every South African can access and easily and efficiently. So just to conclude these few words, COVID-19 has really changed and highlighted how digitalization and digitalization access to services are becoming a huge area of attention and of investment, of course. Public investments, it's clearly an area of investment. This is beyond the webinar. And what it shows is that digital policy is never value neutral. And the EU is here is committed to promote a positive, human-centric vision of the digital economy, as I said before. And this human-centric vision, making technology work for all citizens, it's to fit the technology and the challenges of the society. It's to look at digital skills for all citizens. It's having a technology compatible with climate change. And it's also, and it's important for the EU, ensuring personal data is protected and human rights are upheld through digitalization. And this, to conclude, will strengthen democracy and strengthen public services and work for better, open, and competitive markets. I thank you and congratulate you for organizing this series of webinars.
Thanks so much, Bernard. I agree. If we can get the future of payments right.
My image is frozen. Able
That's
to listen
okay.
to me.
Thank you. No, we were very loud and clear. Thank you. So I think on that, if we can look at the future of payments and transform it through digitization in South Africa, we certainly can move towards a much more powerful e-government service offering, where we can actually push services to our clients and citizens in the country. And when Rudy was telling you about the SRD 350 grant, we really struggled at the beginning because we just didn't know where beneficiaries were. So if we change that through digitization and digital identity, you know, e-government services become far more powerful. And with that, I'm going to actually hand over to Harish, who is the head of global payments. Harish, over to you to actually take us through the presentation. I know you've been traveling, so I hope you are rested enough to present. Thank you. Oh, that's Arun. Sorry, Harish, I'm confusing you with Arun.
Okay, I hope you're able to hear me okay. And thank you for inviting me and then also for the excellent initiative. Let me see if I can move on to slide kind of presenting mode here.
Thank you.
Just 1 minute. Okay, so I hope you're able to see the slides well. So thank you for all the introductions, and it was fascinating to hear the vision you're laying out, and I think this webinar series will for sure be very interesting and will help in setting out an ambitious agenda. So let me start by kind of going back to the basics here, starting with what is a typical kind of a value chain for G2P payments, and I will build my story based on this. So I think kind of at a fundamental level, there are about 5 steps, and then of course this gets executed in iteration, starting with kind of designing the program, informing potential beneficiaries, then kind of managing the applications and identification selection. I already talked about some of the challenges in this area, then onboarding them into the program, then making the payments, and then of course monitoring the performance, and then kind of the feedback loop with respect to ensuring that it is working for the beneficiaries, then also collecting the various administrative data to ensure the integrity of the program, and then also to design future programs. So that's the basic value chain. Now the question is, do we need this to be done, all the building blocks for this to be common across different programs, or do we need one for each program? And here again, the question is also from a government perspective, social benefit transfers are of course one payment flow, but then there are other payment flows which are also relevant. For example, related to some subsidy programs in other areas like agriculture. It could also be scholarships and stipends in the education area. It could also be related to some health programs. And there's also this general trend towards moving from in-kind services of the government to cash transfers, and then also kind of converting in-kind subsidies into cash transfers to kind of bridge the gap. And so there's a big shift towards transfers from the government to the citizens across a range of programs. So I think the question then also is, do we look at it just from a social protection perspective, or do we look at it from also the other parts of the government? One thing which is becoming clearer is sometimes at the times of crisis, where you have to expand the number of people you have to reach because the crisis has impacted people who are typically not under the cover of social protection programs, and they might not be covered under the formal sector safety nets like social insurance. So there's a need to expand, and there this process of identifying whom to cover, whom to include in the program is also a challenge. So I think this is a question to ask ourselves in terms of what elements of this value chain need to be unique to the program, and what can be part of a shared infrastructure which everybody could tap. So moving to the next slide, very often when the discussion of government-to-person payments, the focus is about digitizing the last mile, and also digitization of the last mile is often incomplete. And in our experience, this is not enough for a number of reasons. So starting with, when we talk about digitization, very often the focus is about the program being able to disburse the money to the provider electronically, and that has been possible for a number of years now, and countries are moving towards that. But even in that, there are, of course, issues related to many of the social protection programs in particular are also decentralized in the sense that the administration of that is decentralized given federal structure of governments, and then also involvement of civil society in administering some of these programs. So there's also this element of financial flow from the federal government and the central agency down to the provincial level and then even sub-provincial level for the execution of the program. So while there could be focus on digitizing the financial flows, then after that there is this issue of how do we get the money to the end beneficiary? And then again, if you digitize it, then the beneficiary gets the money in the account, but then the beneficiary has to then go queue up at an agent location or at an ATM and then wait for money to be withdrawn. So there are issues even in the last mile, but even if you do that right, then the issue which comes up is what about the user convenience? Are the users being able to access the funds in an efficient manner? And then do they have to use different payment mechanisms for different programs? And very often there are temporary measures like during the COVID period. So do we use a temporary payment mechanism, and what happens after the program is over? So there's a lot of inefficiencies even with respect to that. And we have noticed that just by digitizing the last mile has not really supported financial inclusion. And what really supports financial inclusion is when the end recipient is able to use that payment mechanism which they have got access to now. They are able to use it for other payment needs of theirs. And then there is enough traction with respect to that they are dependent on that for receiving many of their flows so that they continue to use it, and then they can build their rest of their financial lives on top of that. So just focusing on the last mile has not proven to be enough. Then, so where do we really want to be? So we want to be in a position where kind of we move from silos to common infrastructure for government-to-person payments, and I'm using government-to-person payments instead of social benefit transfers, given what I was mentioning earlier, that there are many other forms of payments from the government to the residents or citizens in the country. Then we also need a unified framework for identifying and enrolling recipients. So Rudy was earlier talking about this issue of double dipping, and that typically happens because you're not able to identify the people uniquely, and you identify one person for the program, and you're not sure whether the person you're enrolling for another program is the same person. So you don't have a unified mechanism for identifying them. And then there's no common process for enrolling. So even if you're able to identify them, because the process is not common in terms of enrollment, you're not able to detect the duplication. And then the other point is about being verifying and validating whether the person you're enrolling is eligible for that particular benefit, or in terms of the quantum of the benefit. because the quantum of the benefit could also be determined by attributes of the person in terms of the household income and things like that. So there is a need for the social protection agencies and any other forms of government payment program managers to be able to access data from various government data sets, vehicle ownership, land ownership, tax data, passport issuance, and then also other agencies of the government, and also potentially other financial sector agencies in terms of what accounts they have and what is the kind of typical transactions they do. And this information is helpful in targeting, in designing the program, and then also to determine the quantum of benefit. And then it's the question of unified view of the beneficiary across programs. So for the government to be able to see what are the different benefits the individual or the household is getting. And this is very critical for ensuring that we are not leaving behind households which deserve more benefit. And then also at the same time, government is not covering households which might not necessarily need all these different programs. And by also being able to look at the unified view, one could also then determine efficient means of reaching them. So the ability to consolidate the payments irrespective of the different budget pools through which the different government programs are funding the benefit transfers or the other forms of transfers from the government to the residents or citizens. So that is one aspect. And the second aspect is about looking at it from the recipient's perspective. So currently, in many countries, the citizens or the residents receiving these benefits do not have a say in how they receive it. And even if they have a say in how they receive it, it's also, they don't have a say in terms of where they can go and withdraw, when they can withdraw, and how they can use it after that. So I think the point about empowering the recipients, giving them choice, not just in terms of which account, but also in terms of how they access it and what else they can do with it, I think can be very influential with respect to the financial inclusion outcomes. And I talked about being able to receive multiple benefit transfers into one account. That builds traction, that builds scale for the financial service provider, and that also builds scale for the government payment mechanisms for them to be more efficient. And then also to be able to change to a different provider based on the change in the circumstances, and then also based on additional services they might need as they continue with their life, to be able to move to a different provider if the circumstances change. And all of this can be collectively seen as empowering the recipients. And then from the financial service providers, very often the dynamic in this government payment programs is about the government being seen as the customer or the financial service provider. So the government is contracting the financial service provider, so the financial service provider optimizes their offering to meet the needs of the government, but might not necessarily focus on the needs of the end customer, which is the recipient or the beneficiary. So the change in the outlook, change in the mindset, change in the perspective of the financial service provider to look at the end recipient and the beneficiary as the customer can have a very significant benefits with respect to financial inclusion, and then also the competition in the market, and then also in terms of more efficiency in the process. So looking at one part of the one aspect, which is the financial flows. So conceptually speaking, the way this government payment flow should be happening is through the typical budget execution mechanism, through the budgeting process in the government, and the government agencies then being able to implement the budget, and when they kind of initiate payment instructions for that to be paid out through the treasury single account of the government maintained with the central bank or any other financial institution as the case may be. And then it goes through the traditional payment system infrastructure so that there is this automatic benefits of interoperability, and then also the reconciliation processes which are inbuilt, and then also the MIS which the government can get from the treasury single accounts and through the payment systems. So that would be the aspiration. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, there are these issues which come in with respect to the decentralized nature of certain social protection programs, certain government programs. So there the question is, decentralization from an execution perspective, does it mean that the financial flow also has to be decentralized? One could even envisage a scenario where the financial flows are managed in a centralized manner, but the execution part in terms of the implementation and decision on who enters the program and how they handling grievances, etc., that could be still done in a decentralized manner. But the financial flows are managed centrally, and this has important implications for liquidity liquidity of the government finances. It also has implications in terms of efficient usage of funds. It has implications for integrity of the program, and then also it has implications for the overall usage of the existing payments infrastructures in the country, and that way more easier for the financial institutions. So that is one part of the one. And if you look at again from the rest of the financial flows in terms of the actual payment flows to the individuals, and then a little bit of the upstream processes. So we are talking about, on the one hand, having multiple programs, which should be seeing the right-hand side as a plug-and-play architecture where they can simply plug onto it. Their focus should be on designing the programs and not having to worry about how the program will be executed in terms of delivering the payment. That part should basically be in a seamless manner for them. If that is the vision, then you have a scenario where you have to look at some shared infrastructure related to, say, the treasury single account I was mentioning, the financial processes, then also with respect to registries on the government side, being able to integrate different financial service providers, and the government not having to choose a particular provider for a particular payment program, and then the financial service providers having a range of options available to the end users, and using general purpose payment instruments instead of a purpose-built payment instrument for that particular program. So I think that would be a conceptual view, and we will for sure be discussing this in the next sessions in terms of the end-to-end architecture, and then also you will hear two different implementations of this from Turkey and India, which in some sense have walked through this particular process I was mentioning. Now, there are, of course, several barriers. So first one is really the challenge is so big that there's always this issue of where do we really start, right? So, and this is also not something where you are starting on a clean slate. So there are programs which are being executed, and the first order of business is to ensure that those are not disrupted at the minimum. And so you have to kind of fix a car while it is running, so to say, right? So I think the question of where to start, and then what is the real, how do you set the vision at an appropriate level? Then there are coordination issues because of coordination across different agencies, both in the financial sector, government, civil society, and then also with respect to private sector providers. There are vested interests who are benefiting potentially from the status quo. And then there are infrastructure gaps. I talked about the end recipient having choice, but then in many cases, they're not able to even access one service provider. So they might not necessarily, there's no choice to begin with for them. So there are issues related to infrastructure which needs to be addressed. And then there is also what can be done immediately, what can be done in the longer term, how do you set a roadmap? So I think all of those are issues issues and barriers to consider. Some building blocks, and I will conclude with that, starting on the government systems, processes, and policies. Starting with integration across different ministries. Some people call it the social registry. Perhaps one needs to think a little bit beyond that, given what I was mentioning, that is not just about social benefit transfers, but also about other types of government payment flows. Then there is about integration of the public financial management systems with the national payment systems. Then about the government policies to change to give the customer the choice. Very often it is encoded in the program in terms of what particular provider to use, and how they have to be compensated, how they have to be empaneled. So there are a lot of policies related to that. So those might have to be relooked. And then there's also the harmonization of the payment processes across the different parts of the government. On the financial sector side, there are issues related to simplifying the account opening process. And one thing which came up very starkly during the crisis response was that you had this issue of enrolling. identifying whom to enroll. And when you enroll that, then there's a separate process to be followed then to onboard the person with an account. So the question is, if you've done the process of enrolling in a government program, why can't that data be used by the financial sector to be able to open that account? And the FATF requirements related to the money laundering and terrorist financing, those give enough flexibility for the financial service providers to be able to use data like that for handling, for opening accounts which have a very limited purpose to begin with, and then you can, as you expand the services available on the account, you can do additional due diligence if needed. So I think a simplification of that process is very, very critical. And there is a case to be made that the enrollment of the person into the program has to go hand in hand with enrolling the person with respect to the payment process and payment accounts. And there are ways it can be done, and there are some countries which have implemented that. Then next is the process of also looking at not just getting the money into the person's account, but also to see how the person will access it. And here, there's a need to, in contexts like South Africa and many emerging markets, there's a need for physical agents to supplement the ATM and shop-based arrangements which are available. So I think, how do you simplify the process of onboarding those agents? How do you make it easier for financial institutions to onboard agents is also an important point. Literacy, financial literacy, then standardization of the processes related to the payment acceptance, the infrastructure side, and then lastly, related to the pricing policies related to these kind of payments. So there's a case to be made that government benefit transfers, the accounts which predominantly receive government benefit transfers, might need to be treated differently when it comes to pricing for accessing ATMs, for accessing other agents. There's a case to be made that maybe one has to look at some kind of a different pricing policy for that, at least for the initial period when these benefit transfers are the primary financial flows into that account. So with this, let me conclude. I'd be happy to answer questions as part of the last segment, and looking forward to listening to the other presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Harish, for actually taking such a complex topic and putting it in a few slides and keeping to time, and doing it in such an elegant and very incisive way that actually makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that you talk about digitizing the last mile, not really helping financial inclusion. Di Dunkley from the South African Social Security Agency always says that everybody seems to think that SASSA beneficiaries are not banked, which is not true. So we've got over 18 million SASSA beneficiaries that sit in the banking environment. But at the end of the day, when it comes to month end, we see massive queues where people are waiting to try and cash out their money so that they can actually spend it. So we see that firsthand. And I think some of the points you make about the future of payments is really exciting, about the interoperability stuff. And so we're very excited to have you here. And I certainly have some questions for you, which I'll leave for a little bit later. We're now going to hand over to our colleagues from Turkey. If we can go back to slides, please.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks. Gülben, are we starting with you, or are we starting with Mehmet?
Yes, I'm Gülben Ünal Yaraş, and I make the presentation.
Okay,
my colleague is unable to participate in the webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gülben. Thank you so much.
Yes.
You can just tell us where you're from, and then you can kind of dive into your presentation.
Okay. I am Gülben Ünal Yaraş. I am a software specialist in Ministry of Family and Social Services. We are glad to meet you in this webinar. So thank you for inviting us to a webinar series. Today, our ministry will share our knowledge and experience about digitizing government-to-person services in our social assistance systems. I can share the presentation. Can you see our presentation now?
Yes, we can. If you can just put it into slide mode.
Okay. Is it okay? Can you see it?
I can see it, but it's still showing in sort of normal mode. If you can just put slide mode on so that we can make it just a bit bigger.
Okay, I will try.
Sometimes you might need to unshare and reshare if that helps. There we go. But I think,
Is it okay?
Can you share an alternate screen? Because we can see it in presentation mode, which is what you see. So you might need to go, are you using a dual screen? That's perfect. Thank you. Great stuff.
Okay.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
Is it okay? Okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
This is our presentation plan. We talk about our social assistance systems because we have experience in COVID pandemic with our social assistance system. As we all know that by digitizing process and making organizational change, government enhanced services, save money, and improve citizens' quality of life. In Turkey, at 2008, for digitizing the government services, e-government gateway is officially opened. And this gateway is a largely scaled internet site that provides access all the public services from a single point. According to data of 2017, in our e-government gateway, there are 803 institutions and there are 5,800 online services. And our gateway has more than 55 million users. In our country, besides the e-government gateway, there are different government service applications or softwares for digitizing the G2P services. Today, in this webinar, I will share our social assistance system. It's a digital service application areas of digitizing the services. It's in our social assistance systems, we call it bütünleşik. Maybe you can learn bütünleşik about in previous webinars. In our presentation, I will use bütünleşik for our system. It means bütünleşik means integrated also. With your permission, I would like to start my presentation. In our social assistance systems, there are 56 million citizens, 16 million households. We are integrated with 28 government databases, and we have 1,003 local branches all over the Turkey. In this system, our social assistance system use in 1,003 local branches. So someone want to make a social assistance application, all of the Turkey, she can do it anywhere. And in our system, there are approximately 13,000 total users. We talk about the social assistance process in our system in bütünleşik. Bütünleşik is located at the center of the whole process. Story begins with the citizens application. Application is with only national identity number. This application is taken by the local branches of our government institution, and national number is unique for all citizens. And the national number is the baseline of bütünleşik. In second step, bütünleşik automatically gets the socioeconomic data from institutions via web services. For example, the health data, the education data, the SS data, lots of data are taken from the different institutions in Turkey. In third step, before the third step, applicants' own declaration about socioeconomic status is taken and recorded into Bütünleşik. And following the application, the household is visited by the local assistance inspection officer, and information from the household visit is collected manually by the officer and is uploaded to Bütünleşik. I make a little detail about household. The household means live together in one roof. And third step, system is cross-check the declarations via household visits and central database queries. And after all these cross-checking, the information presents to the Board of Trustees because of for the eligibility decision. And after the decision on the system, Bütünleşik automatically prepares payment list for eligible households. In the next slides, I will tell about the payment list. I will tell about the digitizing the payment list, how we digitize the payment list. And last step, Bütünleşik system send payment list to the bank for paying to the beneficiaries. We take a look for the whole process, and I would like to tell you a little about our development journey. Our project started in 2010, but development is still continuing because the requirements is never end, of course. The main idea Bütünleşik is to make our social assistance process easy to access, transparent, reliable, measurable, and accountable. We came to when first output of the project is CCT module, which called conditional cash transfer module. After this module, we have different modules to make the social assistance system. In 2011, some assistance programs and supporting procedures such as accounting, human resource, digitalized on Bütünleşik. Main roof of the project development phase was finished at 2015, but I say before, maintenance and improvements are still going and it never ends. The key element of designing Bütünleşik is incremental approach. We have an interdisciplinary team. In this team, there are project managers, social policy experts, software engineers, IT professionals, and we have too many research about other integrated systems in the world. And we have some meetings, we have some online meetings in this process. We had some online meetings, and we had lots of training sessions about e-government systems, about project management, and etc. This is our development life cycle. Bütünleşik is an incremental approach. Instead of doing one great product in 5 years, we dive into sub-modules, and we add these modules to the backbone. In this incremental approach, firstly we design, we collect requirements, then we develop, we made tests, we made development, and after this we have a pilot phase. We have some end user trainings for users. We deploy our modules for selected users. Then after the pilot phase, we make implements to the system, implement new modules. In social assistance systems, there are 3 methods for digitalizing the payments. first one is the social assistance card. Social assistance cooperation with Postal and Telegraph Services Corporation is a government institution in our country. These social cards are exempt from any membership fees, and these cards allow beneficiaries withdraw social assistance payments from ATMs anytime they wish. So they don't have to wait bank queues, and these cards pay for their food, clothing, and other needs at any market they wish. Second payment is payment at home. It's particularly used by the elderly and the disabled beneficiaries who can't go to withdraw their payments. It allows beneficiaries to receive their assistance payments in cash in their homes. This payment at home is cooperation with the Postal and Telegraph Services Corporation, PTT. Third method is transfer to accounts. This method is making in our bütünleşik. I explain in the next slides. This is our payment transactions in our social assistance system. After the decision of Board of Trustees, we in system make a payment list, but before the payment list, the system make prepayment checks, and after the checks, system make a payment list. In the system, a payment list is created. Then this payment list sent to the bank or Postal and Telegraph Corporation, and payment will be made. Then after the payment, collects the money from the bank, and every night bank feedbacks the payment results into our bütünleşik. If a payment cancellation request is sent to the bank, if it's a cancellation payment, it's sent to bank every night. Before the payment list, creation payment list, I told about prepayment checks. It was prepayment checks. I would like to explain. Our system check external system checks. What's the external system checks? We check our beneficiaries' data from different institutions. As you see in the slide, there are 4 different groups of data: social assistance information data. These data from other social assistance institution in the Turkey, for example, Red Crescent, or municipalities, other municipalities in our country. And second group is demographic and social security information. We made batch jobs before the payment list, before creating payment list, and we check the social security information. And the third group is school and health information, because some social assistance programs, system must check the school's situation and health situation. And in back jobs, we take asset data, vehicle, social security, land, or etc. And other transaction before the payment period, we system eligible some beneficiaries files, because they don't match the application conditions. Non-eligible assistance files are removed from a payment scope. With the time task practice, all assistance payments are examined in detail by the system. On average, 4 million assistance files are examined on the basis of assistance types. and assistants failing to meet the requirements are prevented from entering the payment list. After the prepayment checks, system make a payment list creation in payment list creation wizard. In this wizard, the user select central payment type, select the bank, which bank transfer the payment. It's changed to the social assistance programs, of course, and entering the payment information, payment dates, period, etc. And select the foundations, select the local offices that will receive the payment. After the payment list, we send the payment list to the bank from the system. Payment information is written in the payment file, how many, which cost is the payment, and who take this payment. System writes the IBAN number in the payment list. All payment information is written on a single file using the spatial TXT file, and after payment file is sent to bank, in this period we use FTP system for the payment file. For example, payment file is left at the FTP address and designed by each bank. A bank is sent a request to make the payment using the file at the address specified via an email sent by the system. And after the transferring the money from system to the bank, citizens goes to the bank to withdraw the money. As soon as he opens his account, the money is transferred from our account to the citizen account. If the citizen fails to withdraw the money within the specified time frame, the money is transferred back to our account, our Ministry's account. If the citizen had requested payment at door in his assistance application, and if the bank supports payment at door, it should be stated in the payment file. And banks feedback our systems daily night the payment information. It's true or false. Yes, we will talk about the benefits of ISAs, benefits of our social assistance systems. We all have part of social assistance system to automate, full automation of payments, saving the resource in delivery of social assistance. Needness situation inspection decreased from approximately 20 days to approximately 1 minute, because we need only national ID number, and the application is going to the bank. Efficient control and auditing mechanisms were provided with ISAs. Misissues, blocked, and duplications avoid, because in our country, a citizen have only one national number, and all citizens must use the national number. So our system misissues duplications. Social assistance application process shortened and easier. Bureaucracy was minimized, paperwork reduced. And let's talk about the pandemic experiences in COVID-19 pandemic. We are all before the COVID pandemic. We have also our social assistance systems, so we don't need to develop another software or another system, because we have already a integrated system. So we in pandemic, COVID pandemic, we use our e-government gateway we make a online application. We design an application form in the e-government gateway. So citizens make an application in the e-government gateway with their national number, and they don't come to the local officer for application. So it's easy to apply for the social assistance programs in COVID pandemic. And after the application in the government gateway, e-government gateway, all applications transferred to the bütünleşik in daily night, in every night. So before I mentioned about the previous slides, bütünleşik make some bad jobs, make some cross-check or take the data from the government institutions, and it's completed in the system, and the system sent to the payment list to the bank. In COVID pandemic, we use the same way. As I mentioned before, bad jobs via government institutions, asset information, demographic and social security information. In order to combat the negative effects of the pandemic on social economic life, various measures have been taken in the field of social assistance. In this context, an emergency situation decision has been taken in order to support our citizens who have become seasonally needy due to the pandemic. In order to ensure that the needs of our citizens can be responded to immediately, an additional periodic budget has been transferred to our social assistance solidarity foundations. By implementing the pandemic social support program, a 1,000 lira cash support was provided to the households in need. This program was implemented in 3 phases. I will give the details of phases in the following slides. And in the previous slide, we, beside the pandemic social support program, we make national donation campaign, and we made full lockdown social assistance programs. And beside all these programs, the amounts of some social assistance programs have been increased. A pandemic specific social assistance program has been developed within the scope of combating the pandemic. Social assistance was provided to different families in each phase. Cash social assistance was provided to families registered in the first 2 phases, and to families determined by online application in the 3rd phase. In the 3rd phase, 13 million individual applicants were reviewed online. A total of 60 million households have been reached. Thanks to our strong IT infrastructure in bütünleşik, those in need were reached in a very short time. While the first COVID case in our country was detected on 11th of March, first social assistance payments was made on 1st of April. So in a short time, we take applications, we cross the data from government institutions, and we make the payment list, and we make payments to our citizens by the bütünleşik. In pandemic program, we take applications from e-government gateway. A national donation campaign was launched. The name of the campaign, Biz Bize Yeteriz Türkiye'm. The donations collect within the scope of the campaign were delivered to the needy thanks to the conventions provided by the bütünleşik system. And another social assistance programs in COVID pandemic, the lockdown social assistance programs. In our country, it was decided to lock down between 29 of April and 17 of May. During this period, cash support was given to these in need. And there are some challenges in the development of the social assistance programs. In first development, 2010 to 2015. In this time, there are different formats, there are different government institution databases. So firstly, to solve this complication, we make protocols with government institutions. In this protocol, we decide which data taken, which data sent. So we support other government institutions to developing software, to developing web services, because in some government institutions there are knowledge, they are accept from knowledge to develop a software or develop a system. We have strong communication and clear directives to solve these different data formats, different web services. Especially our solution is the national number. The national number, ID number is our unique number. So it's the backbone of the bütünleşik. Only the national number, we all check and we all take the data from and the other government institutions. And in this project, in this development project, we make revisions and new policy instruments, and we have already completed the technical specifications. My presentation is finished. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Gülben. That was actually very interesting. I have a few questions as well, which I've already posted in the chat. We will open that up when we've got a question as well. So you might want to have a look at that and start to think about it in the meantime. I'm going to hand over to Arun Sharma. Arun is actually head of the benefit transfer mission in India and has extensive GTP experience. Arun, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. I'm going to share my screen and I hope it's visible. Just give me a second.
It's coming through. Great. If you can just put it in slide mode. Excellent. Perfect.
Right.
Thanks so much, Arun.
So thank you for inviting me, and I'll try to summarize this quickly, and I'll welcome questions at the end. So this is sharing India's experiences with G2P and data stacks and where we are in this journey. This slide covers the summary of broadly our experiences that through technology, accurate targeting of beneficiaries with multiple ID systems and their proxies is now possible. And this is not just the case for India and elsewhere, but it's globally now. These are the standards that are taking shape. That combined with improvements in the payment systems is transforming the social benefits delivery across the board. The data that governments have, it's becoming richer, and we are connecting the dots better now so that we have holistic information on either a household or a family or an individual. There are risks associated with that, and governments are conscious about it. There are civic society movements that are taking care of privacy, digital rights, and consent frameworks, which need to be embedded in any kind of systems that are there. But there's a very thin line differentiating the need for collecting excessive data and what we can call or what we can transcend into the surveillance or the government's keeping tab, the big brother watching. But keeping the discussion to this topic. Speaking of data stacks, stacks like health stack enabled by digital health IDs, agri stacks, education stack, social registries that Harish had also spoken about are gaining interest globally. India has started working on these stacks as we speak. Health stack is something that is currently under development at an advanced stage. And additionally, the last point that I've mentioned is about biometric payments, which is an offshoot of benefits delivery program. We weren't intending on building it, but it was always a vision, and it is now coming into maturity. So this is my presentation is broken into 3 parts. The first part is the G2P program that India runs. So I'll mention a few slides on that. The second part is around the digital ID, because our G2P program is essentially embedded on the digital ID, India's digital ID, and you'll see why the case is so. And then the larger discussion around the data stacks. So we started in 2013 as a planned and a targeted delivery of social benefits. India has been providing social assistance since independence, since 1947. But this was the first time that a very concerted approach was taken. And we have currently 311 national G2P programs, which cover cash and in-kind benefits. This is the progress in a nutshell. So currently we are at about $80 billion annual transfers, and close to about 1.8 billion people are receiving this. Now, these are non-unique beneficiaries because our systems as of now do not allow accessing the systems or the data of one program for another program. And there's the privacy element built into the Indian ecosystem as such. These are the key enablers of our G2P program, and it has taken several years to build this. Almost some of them are about 15 years old now, but it's wonderful that it has all come together over the past 4 or 5 years to provide this rich ecosystem that we're talking about. The first and foremost is Aadhaar, India's national unique ID, which I'll be speaking about subsequently. There are more than 1.3 billion Aadhaar numbers that have been issued. We have 1.4 billion bank accounts in the country, which was taken up in 2016 onwards as a targeted approach of opening at least one transaction account for every individual. Not to say that the goal is complete, but largely we've been able to cover the large variety, the large population, especially at the level where we wanted to reach, at the bottom of the pyramid where people don't have the access to financial systems. Then, of course, everything runs on the network infrastructure. So the telecom infrastructure supported by cheap data in India has been a definite enabler of the entire G2P success. And slowly we are bringing or we are moving to a mobile governance, wherein we're trying to provide the empowerment to the beneficiary by way of apps through which the beneficiary can directly enroll into programs, can apply for benefits, can receive benefits. We are digitizing the last mile also, so that the beneficiary can then transact with the money that has reached her account to pay or to even gain credit through some of the other supporting systems that are being developed. So now I'm coming on to Aadhaar, which is India's national ID. This is we have a 12-digit randomly assigned number, which has no other intelligence built into it except just the ID part. It's a digital ID, and it's a very robust and secure system. It's absolutely safe, and fundamentally, the law provides power to the ID owner. So consent framework, as I mentioned before, has been built into the law that I cannot force a beneficiary to share her Aadhaar details till the time she does not want to. Now, whereas government benefits are concerned, there is a test of proportionality that was debated in our courts, and which has been found admissible, that in order to gain certain benefits, it is all right to seek the Aadhaar or the private ID of the citizen. And this is the current system that we have. Now, storing the Aadhaar and sharing of Aadhaar data is highly technical, and again, it's very safe. And there are security protocols that have been designed by the authority that controls the Aadhaar data. So far, in more than 11 years of Aadhaar's functioning, things have been going very smoothly, and it has enabled us to make sure that the people receive their benefits. Aadhaar, as I said, why it has been embedded into our delivery, the social benefits delivery program. There are three main users of Aadhaar. The first one is, of course, the identification bit, but Aadhaar is also a financial address, and it is also a payments instrument. So it has three roles which it plays. The first part around the identity authentication bit. So all government programs need to maintain the Aadhaar details of the beneficiaries in separate databases. And each time a beneficiary is registered, they need to be authenticated. So to ensure that the correct and the identified beneficiary is the one who's there in the system, which is done through the various authentication options available, depending on the kind of the benefit that is being given. Maybe the amount is too much, or there is a sensitive kind of transaction. But broadly, we have three kinds of authentication processes. The first and most secure is the biometric authentication. Then we have the demographic authentication and OTP-based authentication. We've recently added offline authentication, wherein the QR code on the Aadhaar number or the Aadhaar card can be scanned. We don't call this strictly authentication, but it's verification which can help in certain low-value transactions. On the payments bit, what we also did was to couple or to map the Aadhaar number, the ID number, with the transaction bank account of the individual. And this has helped us tremendously in terms of avoiding payments failures and accurate targeting of the individual. Now, one risk that we have is if you have a beneficiary A, it's very difficult to ascertain the bank account that has been associated or is mapped in a government database with the person A. So to avoid the multiple checks that you would need to do in case you're not sure of the identity of the person, as well as the financial address that person has provided. So we coupled Aadhaar and the digital ID and the financial address in one. And we have an entity called the National Payments Corporation of India, which is a non-profit company created by the Central Reserve Bank and several banks of the country. And it maintains the retail payments infrastructure. And they maintain the Aadhaar mapper. So the big benefit for the governments is that at the time of registration, the beneficiary only needs to give their Aadhaar number, and they are authenticated by the same number, and the money also goes into the account that is linked with the or mapped with the Aadhaar number that they've given. And this is the schema. And now we are gradually trying to move to Aadhaar-based payments for our G2P transfers. So last year it was only about 55%. Due to COVID, we had relaxed some requirements, but our target is to take this to 100% in the next couple of years. The last function of Aadhaar is as a payments instrument through micro ATMs. And this allows remote delivery of cash as and when it is required. And we're trying to digitize this as well. But in terms of the last mile ecosystem for payments delivery, especially in the COVID pandemic, when ATMs could not be restocked with cash and there were other issues, we realized that that was the time when the Aadhaar-enabled payments, which constituted about 2 to 3% of all the cash withdrawals in the country. In the past 2 years, it has now increased to about 11-12%. And there were some issues with the operational aspects of it, which are being resolved. And there is a greater uptake in banks because they need to take a membership of the AEPS network, as well as agent commissions that drive this in terms of enrolling people. So this is again something that is improving as we speak each day. And the uptake of this is largely being appreciated. So overall, through accurate targeting, through proper delivery, we've been able to save about $25 billion. And this is across all the programs. So we have calculations for each of the programs on how many fake records they were able to eliminate, and across pensions, scholarships, employment guarantee, etc. So now coming on to these a number of databases that we have, I spoke about health, education, agriculture, etc. So the idea is to get everything in one place so as to predict what might a family need, what might a household need, even if they don't know how to apply, because there is a huge information asymmetry in the Indian population. The bottom of the population, the bottom of the pyramid, the people who are poor are really, really poor without any means of recourse or any kind of grievance that they can go to. So that's one plan for them. And as you can see, from cash-based systems, we're in the middle slot currently where we have integrated IT systems. And now we are moving to convergence and rationalization of programs. And of course, through APIs, sharing data networks seamlessly. So these are the tenets of our data stack program. There are broadly 3 layers. There are more, but just to summarize, there are broadly 3 layers. The first is the presence-less layer, where my identity can be confirmed through Aadhaar. That is the building block. Then we have the paperless layer. Any documents that I need, we have built a digital locker for any and all documents, and we are populating it more and more with the issuing authorities, which are coming on to DigiLocker. It also supports e-KYC and e-sign procedures. So I can sign off after presenting my documents along with my consent that these documents can be shared. And of course, lastly, is the cashless layer that I can pay using the UPI, which is a payments protocol that we've adopted, the Aadhaar payments bridge, and the Aadhaar enabled payment systems. Now, all of this is available on a mobile phone, which I'll share in subsequent slides. But just to speak about DigiLocker, because this is something that we are populating even as we go today. So So it's a digital store of key documents with more than 1,200 issuers at the moment. And as and when more and more issuers come on board, more and more requesting entities. So that's what the enriching the ecosystem takes, some kind of a network effect, that you have more users who request more documents, which then incentivize more issuers to come on the system. So ultimately, what we'll have is a digital format of any paper document that we have today, a variety of certificates and documents are already available, including the birth certificate, Aadhaar, driving license, some services of the passport, insurances, wills, death certificate, etc. are all on DigiLocker effectively as of now, but we are getting more and more college degrees, key education documents, and so on. Soil health cards for farmers, or health IDs for beneficiaries, the health stack will all come on this, and through this they'll be shared across multiple programs. And this is just a little schema that it's very simple. The issuer uploads it on DigiLocker with the consent of the citizen, then it is accessed by the requesting entity. And of course, as I mentioned, we have about 1.2 billion mobile phones in the country, and the next push is to enable all services that we have. We have, as I mentioned, 311 national G2P programs, but there are multiple services associated with them. So for example, we have the food subsidy program, which enables a person to access highly cheap, highly subsidized food ration from fair price shops. Now, the benefit transfer in this is the person who's entitled to receive it can go to a fair price shop and take their ration, which is entitled to them. But there are other services, for example, finding where the nearest fair price shop is, finding your entitlement, and so on. So there could be multiple services associated with a particular scheme or a program, and we're building all of that into mobile apps, and we are clubbing them all together to an aggregator app called Umang, which stands for Unified Mobile New Age Governance. And this, when we already have more than 2,000 apps on Umang, and when it all comes together, you can see what kind of a powerhouse this would be. So the current constraints are, of course, this is available on a smartphone only, but we are bringing out new and very cheap smartphones, which are just a step up above the ordinary feature phone. One of the largest companies in the country today, Jio, is combining with Google to come out with their phone, which is going to be, I think, 600 rupees, which is less than, I think, $10. And once all of that can be packed into a single application, so you can see some of these screenshots. So we have various categories, as you can see, the one that has been highlighted. So all student-related services are available in one application. So you can just go to the, let's say, National Scholarship Portal if you want to see what kind of scholarships are you can avail or you can be entitled to. You go there, go to the National Scholarship Portal, and you can either register yourself afresh, search your institution, and so on. So all these are already available on Umang. We're trying to make it richer by, again, creating the network effect by adding more and more services. And these are all searchable. So when I say 2,000 services, it doesn't mean that the person gets overwhelmed. There are categories that are built in, such as farmers, social security, women, students, and it's very easy to navigate. And of course, UI is something that is completely evolving all the time. So as and when newer methods are available, we'll upgrade that as well. Additionally, something else we're working on is portability of benefits. So just like South Africa, India also has a federal system of governance, and the person living in a particular area, in a domicile, he or she is tied to that area for receiving her benefits, be it school, be it health, be it ration that I mentioned. The address defines where you can draw your subsidies from. And this was a huge constraint till now. And now we've taken up portability. By that we mean combining the databases of all 36 states and union territories that we have in the country. So we have something like 36 federated databases, and then one national database which talks to all 36 databases that are there together. And we've enabled this for the food delivery, which was very useful in the pandemic when we had large-scale domestic migration, people returning back to their hometowns because of lack of employment and everything was shut down. So because of that, they could access their benefits wherever they were living. So making the backend databases interoperable helps in portability of benefits. And this has been done for food, but we're also extending it to other programs. I mentioned this. So this is the One Nation, One Ration card. So now if you have a ration card, you can access your food subsidy anywhere in the country. This is something that is under work currently, the National Digital Health Mission, and this will again populate our digital health systems, which will again then plug into the other systems that are available. And as you can see, it's going to be a very rich and vast network of digital records. Health is one that is at an advanced stage, but we're also working on an education stack and an agri stack and several other systems. So this is where I'll leave you. In short, this is what I planned for, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Arun. That's really fascinating. Just one question. How long has it taken you to put the stack in place?
Actually, the stack is not very old. About 4 years, I would say, since we conceptualized it and we've started working on it. But the ingredients have been in the works for the past 10-15 years. As I said, so the ID system is, we started the National Health ID system in 2010, but after a slow start, that picked up in 2015. The banking infrastructure took off again in 2016-17. But working on the stack per se, it's a very recent concept by including and plugging everything together. But you have to count the preparation that went in. That would be again another 10 years lead time, but because we started from scratch practically.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open up to some questions, if you can just give me a seckie, but maybe we can start off with just some reflections from some of our guests. So, Fani, are you in the room?
Kathy, yes, I am.
Wonderful. So, Fani is actually at SASSA in charge of operations. Fani, maybe some of your reflections, as an official at SASSA, who faced a crisis at the time we decided to roll out a grant, and we were worried we might have 15 million applicants and we'd have to pay them in a very short space of time. So maybe some of your reflections on, what you've heard today and how that could be relevant for SASSA, but also some of the challenges. You saw Mark Ritz's comment in the chat saying he doesn't think it's a payment problem, but rather sort of it is a last mile problem. And I see Kate has responded to that. We think SASSA doesn't have a payment problem, but the rest of government actually has a problem in terms of onboarding and actually paying beneficiaries. So Fani, just some thoughts from you? You can turn on your camera,
Kathy,
Fani, if you don't mind.
Yeah, all right. Kathy, I think it was actually interesting, and good afternoon to everyone. It was interesting to listen to the two case studies. If I was to start commenting on the Turkish one, to indicate that what I noted is the population size there is almost similar to the South African one. Secondly, there was a number of similarities that I had identified in that case study, which we are taking home as SASSA in this journey, as we attempt to clean up some of the challenges that we have. But to be specific, there is a number of the size of databases which the social security system for Turkey is interfacing with in comparison to ours. It's homework for me. The other element is the usage of that system in terms of other benefits to the clients out there, of which ours, there is a bit of differences. They're having donations that are taken and also being recorded through that particular system and being tracked, which is something interesting. And I looked at some of the challenges which they have. There is a little bit of similarities. Some of the challenges they are having issues associated with organizational reorganization of one of the directorates. I think in our modernization process, we are likely going to come across such. So there is a number of elements that I've noted coming from this engagement. But again, to the last presentation that we've seen, just to say, I think this particular one, I noted it, hoping that we'll note it as government, not just for SASSA, the 12-digit electronic unique identifier which they have, which I'm getting a sense that they are using it. It is being utilized a lot in terms of authenticating payments, authenticating clients, and it seems to be a universal system which is being applied. So I think I've noted it because in the other broader government discussions that we are going to be having, I think that's the one area which we possibly still need to deal with. Of course, we're using the 13-digit identity number, but there is a need as we're transitioning towards digitization across the spectrum. I noted the stack system as well, which the colleague was making reference to, and I'm saying to myself, as the South African government trying to move towards considering the establishment of a central database, and possibly the stack system was an interested piece that I've picked up, which we will deliberate outside of this engagement. But the changing paradigm in delivery of welfare payments, I think it was the one piece that was interesting. The eKYC, which is an area where we would appreciate later on. And I think, of course, these sessions, we are creating friends. And I'm hoping that I will continue to engage to unpack some of the elements with the colleagues that were on the line. But of course, Kathy, there was a number of learnings that we have picked up. The colleagues are right. Our problem is not paying into accounts, because of the 18 million social grants recipients, all of them, money gets into an account. I think where we are at the moment, and I liked the opening that Tim Marcella has provided in the engagements, because we actually trailing on the Reserve Bank strategy 2020-2025, trying to make sure that we do not fall behind in this space of the Reserve Bank and the rest of the payment industry wanting to introduce alternative payment options through the introduction of digital payments, etc. So I think that's the next area where we as SASSA will be transitioning into, considering some of the clientele that we're starting to service, who are starting to become a larger group of our beneficiary cadre. So as a result, we need to move with them. They are technology savvy, and we need to start introducing alternative payments other than just an account. But in a nutshell, they are lessons that we have learned in these engagements. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Fani, for those very interesting reflections and also to guide on the way forward. I thought I saw Tebogo Maruping. It would be great to hear from him. Tebogo, are you here? It doesn't look like it. Daresh, are you here?
I am, Kathy.
Great. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about your reflections, given the work that you've been doing at the UIF?
Yeah.
Trying to unlock COVID tourist payments. And then I think we can open up the floor and address the questions because you can just raise your hands. Thanks, Daresh.
Okay, Kathy. I think I'll be very quick. I mean, I didn't know there's a thing called system envy. And I think I have system envy after these two presentations. I think they were really good presentations. And, you know, the one thing that struck me on the Botaneshik system presentation was the fact that they use a single platform for over 5,000 services. And so that's, I thought, was incredibly progressive, and I wish we could get there. You know, the one important factor that I picked up on that Turkish presentation was also around the data integration. And they talk about having 28 databases that are integrated. And during the UIF TERS experience, you know, we ran into a real problem with integration, and we found it very difficult to verify against Home Affairs and correctional, you know, services and education, etc. So that's one thing I think we really do need to work on, and we could learn from. I think, you know, the one thing that struck me is how easily both the Indian system and the Turkish system was able to scale up during an economic shock. So they were able to respond quite quickly and add new services to a single payment system or to a single integrated system, and that is really beneficial in times of need. I think the other thing that struck me about the Indian presentation was that you need a set of enablers, and you know, they talked about their own unique identifier. You know, the fact that they've worked on creating additional financial access points, the fact that you need an efficient and a reliable network system. And then the wonderful thing in that one diagram on the various apps that you can have on your cell phone, and you know, the use of the Umang system to have citizen-centric mobile apps. I thought that was wonderful. And you know, we're in that space now in the world where we have all these the smartphone technology available, and I think that's certainly the way to go. So how do we leverage more of that you know, smartphone mobile technology? Yeah, those are some of my reflections, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Daresh. I'm going to open up. People can actually put up their hands, but I'm also going to start sort of trawling through the questions that are in the chat. So Portia, do you want to maybe ask your question on infrastructure?
Kathy, Portia has had to excuse herself.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks. I'll quickly
set up separately.
Okay, but I'll ask the question anyway, because I think it's an important question around infrastructure. So to Arun and Gülben and Harish. She asks, we talk about shared infrastructure, so we need to explore current technologies such as central hosting, cloud as a technology to be regulated. How have you addressed sort of storing of information and information sharing using various platforms, not only just payments? So maybe Arun and then Harish.
Thanks, Kathy. We in India like to build everything on our own. So we have adopted technologies. We've taken a lot of support from Microsoft, and we have our own cloud services. That's a government cloud service. But for non-sensitive applications, we also host some applications on the Amazon cloud. But having said that, most of our work is built by us, and we use both. So we are open to evolving as and when new technologies are available. So that's one. But at the same time, we do like to control the use and who we grant access to.
Harish?
Kathy, from my side, I think the only thing to add here is that ultimately this will have to be based on the overall government's open data policy and overall government architecture. And there is this trend independent of the government payments discussion trend on the government side, move towards the government service bus and government data networks and so on. So I think all of that, all of those are the enablers for the kind of issues we're discussing. Of course, there are different ways you can organize the data, different ways you can architect it. But ultimately, I think the key elements really are that you're able to access different data sources, being able to uniquely link that to an individual, and then doing it in a manner that it is only used for the intended purpose and it doesn't stay on and gets abused, right? So I think those are the key elements. Thank you.
Gülben, the question from Jason Wang in the chat says, does Turkey's e-government system leverage other channels such as WhatsApp and USSD for registration and application? And I have a similar question, which is around the social assistance bank card and the payment into a bank account. So in South Africa, every single citizen gets a bank card, which actually gives them access to their bank account. Is that the case in Turkey, that there's a one-to-one link between the account and the card? Or do you opt to get a bank card, which is almost a wallet on its own, or you can get paid into your bank account? And I suppose linked to that is the PPT, since it's a government entity, is it a bank? Or like our post bank in South Africa? So I've got a few questions, and then I see Ola's hand is up, so she'll come in straight after your comment. Gülben, over to you.
Yes, okay. Thank you for your questions. I would like to reply all of your questions in order. Firstly, in our e-government system, there are two ways: website application and mobile application. But there is out of these channels, there's not another channels, WhatsApp or another channel, but there are two ways to use application. After the application and over the application, e-government gateway system send an SMS to all applicants, to all beneficiaries. And in payment process, the gateway also sends SMS. And second question is about PTT. PTT is not a national bank. Its name is Post and Telegraph Corporation, but it has payment channels. So in every district, in every city in Turkey, there are a local office for PTT. So PTT sent payments to from our bank account to persons or citizens' personal account. And third question is about household information. Household information is stored at our ministry. We have a central database. We have one database, and the other government institution database, 28 database, transfer the information to our central database. So we collapse our database in one central database. And another question is about databases. Which informations take from these database? We take social security information, social security data, vehicle data, income data, agricultural land data, health, real estate, and national identity data. Another question is about self-direction data. We also take applicants' own declaration about employment status, income, or another socioeconomic information. There are three data channels. First is self-direction data channel, take from a single form. And second data channel is household visits. The officers go to the households and take data from the household members. And third channel is our government databases. We collapse these three. We collapse data from these three channels and cross-check these three channels data, and we made the estimation in the system, and this estimation seen in the system from Board of Trustees. And last question about is CCT. In CCT, there are same databases uses, but especially for CCT, we take educational data and we take school attendance for this program. We take these data from Ministry of Education. And that's all.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Ola, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Kathy.
Just introduce yourself, Ola.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ola Otamatsane from the National Treasury, responsible for, amongst other things, financial inclusion. So, Kathy, very interesting presentations. I think my takeaway from the Turkey and the Indian presentations is that I think the first thing we need to do as government, and I'm saying this because, you know, this is the first webinar and already we are going into the technicalities. What I think we should be discussing as a first stepping stone is the policy imperatives, government policy imperatives discussion. We're supposed to be talking about the digital economy and the digital ecosystem and how as government we are going to pull that together. So we need a conversation where Department of Home Affairs is in the room telling us what they are doing on digital identity. We need the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies in the room to tell us what they are doing with digital infrastructure issues. We need DTIC and the Competition Commission in the room to tell us what they are doing on competition in the digital economic issues. So these are and all other players in government, Kathy. I think that's the first, for me, that's the first high level conversation we're supposed to be having. My second issue, I'm not sure why the webinar is focusing only on G2P, because I think one of the comments from Mark Brez, which I agree with, we're supposed to be also talking about P2P, payments to business, person to business, person to government as well. I mean, a simple example, when I go and pay for my car license disc, the system at my nearest post office is always down, and therefore they need to pay my disc in cash, you know. So if we are to solve this problem, we need to solve the whole ecosystem and not only start with G2P, because if you are going to fix the whole ecosystem and the whole digital infrastructure ecosystem, then all of these things fall into place. So that's my second question, my second comment. Then my next comment is that then the ecosystem comes in interoperability issues. So in this ecosystem, the interoperability needs to be seamless. Yes, we've got interoperability here and there, but I think it's something that we still need to do. So Kathy, just maybe in closing, unless we talk about the digital economy and the digital ecosystem conversation as government first with banks out of the room and the team and his colleagues out of the room, just government saying we are committing to this journey. And then we can say in data team, we are happy to support you in your payments vision. And then Kathy, I just have one question to the Turkey colleague on the 28 database integration that she spoke about. I want to find out if there were key, maybe 3, 4, 5 databases that they had to first as a base, put together as a base, and then where all the other databases then had to connect into. That's my question. Thanks, Kathy.
Super, thanks, Ola. Jason, and then I will hand over to, I'm going to ask a question to Harish, and then we can hand over to Arun and Gülben. Jason?
Hi, colleagues. So I'll turn off my video. Great. Great, yeah, thank you very much. And just an observation from my side, which is, it seems like, and to Olanse's point was, I noticed that like in India, in Turkey, there's almost like a centralization of government services. And I believe in the EU, there's also the EU interoperability framework. And I'm kind of wondering if we maybe need to, I'm planting the seed down, is that, what is the relevance, importance of a broader interoperability, interoperable government service framework to enable this digital ecosystem? And what is that role and that relevance in the discussions that we are having? Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Jason. So Harish, for you, I've asked a question around interoperability, but really about your experience from an institutional perspective. So when we start thinking about interoperable infrastructure and sort of a much more coordinated, if we use Ola's word, digital ecosystem, because I agree, it's not just about G2P, and we do look at G2P and P2G, but it is P2B and G2B and P2P, and, so just in terms of your experience, institutionally, who drives this? And it's important because it's something Rudy had sort of raised at the beginning, and a concern, is this a whole of government approach that then kind of approaches the central bank? Has it been sort of driven by the presidency in some instances? Is it driven by a social security system need in the country? I understand it varies, but just sort of your experience, you can see India's actually starts with digital identity and then progressively sort of expands that stack and then adds social security and other layers to it. So just your thoughts on that? It's not a fair question, I recognize.
No, there are multiple elements to this. So I think the question which Ola is raising is, of course, a very, very fair one. I think here, if you just go back kind of a few years and then see kind of how this whole discussions, how these topics were discussed, the work on the payment system side has been motivated by different factors, right? And to some extent, it was the central banks who were leading the work, and with a lot of focus on improving the payment flows between financial institutions to make the kind of the financial stuff, kind of the money markets and other things work well, and then for government to be able to move their funds around easily, right? So that's where the focus was. And the retail sector was pretty much left to the commercial banks to develop products and market it to their customers as part of the broader banking services, right? The issue of the government paying attention to this topic in a very big way comes from two angles. One is for making it easier for them to collect money, revenue, and then also for the government to be able to distribute benefit transfers in a more efficient way. And the focus has been much on the government to person payment side, because there are very unique challenges there, because this reaches segments of population who are historically highly likely to be unbanked, live in difficult contexts where the banking system is not reached. And that's why this has deserved a special focus, because it requires an active intervention from the government side to come in as an institution which puts up the first wave of infrastructure on which then others can come in and build services, right? So I think that has been the general direction. So now, very clearly, if the payment systems in the country were working well, then of course there's no need for this discussion in terms of the payments part. There are of course other issues to be talked about in terms of the data integration and so on, but that's not the luxury which many countries have, and that's why we need to discuss. Now, one thing is very clear: you don't build a separate infrastructure for government to person payment. So whatever infrastructure you build has to be leveraged for other payment flows as well, and only then it'll be viable. Otherwise, it will simply not be viable, right? So it has to get integrated into the economic lives of those particular communities, and it has to meet their needs. So it has to, whatever you build has to meet not just the GDP, but also other payment flows, remittances, their business transactions, and if it is kind of rural communities and farming communities, meet their agricultural value chains and so on. So that would be my long-winded answer to the question. Now, in terms of the interoperability aspects, see, I think here the interoperability is in multiple contexts. So we can talk about interoperability on the payment side, but there's also interoperability with respect to the different government systems and processes, right? So a person who's enrolled in one government database for one particular program, whether that data can be leveraged by another agency, right? So that is also one way of looking at interoperability. And then also the data which is available for the particular individual with some other government agencies, from a tax database or residency or vehicle ownership, how that data can be easily extracted is also kind of one way to look at interoperability. And then for the financial institutions and for the government agencies, are they able to access this through one interface, through one, or they have to receive this information from multiple locations and in different formats and so on? That is also one way of looking at interoperability. So I think there are multiple dimensions, and in terms of who's responsible, I think it cannot be just one institution. I think it has to be everybody, and that's why I think the whole of government and Ola's suggestion to first convene all the government authorities, I think is a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Arun, some of your comments to the questions and maybe addressing some of the interoperable challenges?
Thanks, Kathy. I'll take up the interoperability issue first, and I agree with what Harish said. I'd just like to add one more thing, is that when we look at G2P transfers, we are looking at the perhaps the last thing that has come to surface. There are underlying public financial management and budgeting and accounting questions under play. So a strong point around interoperability, Harish mentioned the databases on which government department or program does the beneficiary belong to, and whether the other department can leverage or access it or not. But for us, that we are facing it, and we'll soon see some changes there, is the flow of funds, the budgeting that we do. So the gentleman who asked, I think it was Jason, this question that are we seeing an over-centralization? That's simply because it mirrors the flow of funds that we have. So we have the national programs, we have state programs, and we have some sub-state programs. Money flows largely India and there are similar examples elsewhere. When the funds are allocated down the line, so essentially every G2P program is a budget line item function of that particular government unit. So a holistic way to address this would be to create a separate budgetary framework or a public financial management framework or an accounting framework for all G2P transfers. And this is something we'll need to come to. And it will then be pivoted maybe in our payment systems, because that's the most efficient way to see it. What we see in our experience is often that when you say G2P, what is that G? It could be the central government, so the money has been released from here, but it could be then parked at some other subnational agency, and then it has not been passed on down to the beneficiary. So interoperability also needs to take this into account. There are obviously other dimensions as Harish had mentioned, and this is one point that we often leave out, that for a fully efficient G2P system, there are deeper public financial management reforms that need to accompany this. And I think soon we'll have dialogues around this elsewhere.
Thank you, Gülben. If you can just indulge me for 5 more minutes. I just want to listen to Gülben's comments, and we've got a comment from Mark Britz, and then one that was just asked by a colleague. So if we can, Gülben. Have we lost her? There we go.
Thank you for last question. I want to explain the last question. There are 2 main databases in our system. One is Social Security database, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and Central Civil Registration System, Ministry of Interior. Firstly, before data transfer, we made protocols with the institutions. After the protocols, we take data from government's web services, and data is written in our central database, but we can gather the data from directly the specified institutions database. We use web services. Web services is a channel. There is a central database, and other databases is here, and the databases and our databases is linked by the web services. Lastly, since 2018, municipalities and red restaurants add to our government institutions. At that moment, there are 115 municipalities data in our system.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Gülben. So Mark has got 2 comments. One is on the development of a digital identity that is available as a centralized solution and a decentralized block. And that has been developed, and you can actually plug onto it. Interestingly enough, ABSA actually has got digital identity using a blockchain and actually promotes self-sovereign identification. I think the point about that is, should it be integrated into the Home Affairs system, or is the private sector going to take over? So maybe something to think about. And then there's a question from Bhavanesh, who actually says, and that's to Arun, it says, where do you see G2P and P2P in a world that's embracing DeFi on a larger and larger scale? And especially, I'll take some time for G2P payments to come on DeFi if it is a good use case. So we're now moving into Arun. If it's too complex to answer, you can skip it.
No, I already answered it. I said,
was that your comment? Sorry, I didn't see it. Okay.
Obviously,
great.
we can look at El Salvador for the test case.
Crashing of crypto over the last few days. I think it's dropped about 11% since yesterday. So just parting comments. Harish, 1 or 2 sentences on sort of G2P and P2G?
Yes, I think the only the thought I would like to leave everybody with is essentially that this topic is crucial from multiple angles, starting from broader discussions around linkages with digital economy, also with respect to economic development, and then certainly with respect to kind of livelihoods and poverty reduction. And I think it is important to look at it holistically. We cannot do everything in one go. Arun was kind of trying to also subtly indicate that many of the building blocks took a number of years to build, and South Africa starts with a good foundation. So I think it should be it is important to set a vision and make progress in a methodical way. Thank you.
Great. And so with that, I'd like to close the session. I'd like to thank our speakers for coming on. It's been very exciting listening to you. I've learned a hell of a lot, and I'm sure everyone in the webinar has as well. And we certainly look forward to engaging with you further. I would just like to remind everyone that the next webinar is on the 22nd of September, and it actually focuses on the next generation of G2P payments. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. We will be sharing the presentations as well as the link to the recording. So we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks so much. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye, Augustin.
Bye, Katie.
We're very quiet.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Kathy.
Here's Ntantla. We have to catch up.
Yes, my angel. How are you?
And you.
Good. Nice to see you, Kathy. Bye-bye. Bye.